It was a lover's lane, a quiet, dusty, dead-end road miles from Main Street, Moundville. A spot so uncommonly traversed, a car with engine running, taillights blazing late into the night, could go unnoticed. It was here they found Teresa Mayfield's truck, body inside, gunshot wound to the head. Teresa's younger sister broke the terrible news to their mother.
When I went to the house, Mama was sitting in the recliner. I knelt down on my knees and I grabbed her and I said, "Mama, she's gone. She's gone." Do you have any idea how hard that was?
Teresa's daughter, Kelsey, had spent a sleepless night waiting in vain for her mother to come home. How did you find out?
My dad came and told my brothers and I. It was just awful realizing that your worst nightmare had come true. For a brief second, I thought she had committed suicide just because I knew how stressed out she was, but then I also knew how much she loved her family.
Everybody who knew Teresa knew that, even Sheriff Kenneth Ellis, who drove out to the crime scene, if that's what it was. Corporal Mark Boyd, Alabama Bureau of Investigation, met him there. This case was kind of personal for you, Sheriff.
Yes. My daughter and Miss Teresa and Scott's daughter, they played softball together.
So you see Teresa out at the ballpark and things.
Every game. It felt like part of my family was gone, too.
They had a look around the truck. No sign of a struggle. Dusting revealed no viable fingerprints. There were no footprints, not even a loose hair. Puzzling.
Was there any thought, once you saw the scene, that this was a suicide?
There was things missing that prevented the suicide theory.
Like what?
If you're going to commit suicide with a gun, it's usually at the scene.
It was clear Teresa had been murdered, shot with a gun which was now missing. And what was more, her cell phone, the one that was always attached to her hip, was nowhere to be found.
Did it look like it could have been a robbery?
Well, the wallet wasn't taken. The purse was on the console, but the contents of the purse had been dumped out in her lap.
A clumsy attempt at staging, you might say.
Yes.
But there was one important clue the killer left behind.
We noticed that the only window down was the driver's window. So we figured that she had to have known the person because she had let down her window. We had to ask ourselves who could get her to this location and why was she murdered?
Someone in Moundville had to know something.
From there, the investigation went where?
Investigating her inner circle, trying to find a motive.
And usually, so I'm told, in cases like this, the husband has got to be a person of interest.
Yes.
So as the family gathered to mourn the loss of their beloved Teresa, Scott couldn't be with them. He was down at the sheriff's office answering questions.
He came willingly?
Yes.
Had no issue? Did he ask for an attorney or anything? Or
No, he did not.
Corporal Boyd chatted with Scott for 3 long hours. And during the whole time, he was cooperative and helpful.
You know, the standard questions that we would ask is, is anyone having an affair? Are you having an affair? No. Was she having an affair? No.
Good marriage, happy marriage, Christian marriage.
Right. I asked him, did they argue? He said no.
Scott answered all their questions about what Teresa was supposed to be doing that morning. He told them he phoned Teresa from his morning job on a farm, a wake-up call, and then about 2 hours later, she called him. But the call faded out. He couldn't hear a thing.
And Scott said that it sounded like she was on the road.
He thought nothing of it then, he said, but now? Was it a distress call? No way to know. But there was one thing that call certainly cleared up for investigators. Scott could not have killed Teresa. He was something like 30 miles away, up near Tuscaloosa. Had a breakfast receipt to prove it.
He had stopped at Hardee's and had a receipt showing that he was there.
So Scott rejoined his family, caught up in the terrible business of grieving.
I kept wondering, why was it happening to our family?
It was awful. Who would ever imagine you'd have a murder in your family?
Investigators tried, with the help of friends, to fill in the gaps of Teresa's last hours. They talked to Scott and Teresa's friend Dawn Lavender. She had plans to go shopping with Teresa the morning of the murder.
I'm sure Dawn was shocked and upset by what had happened.
She did cry during the interview. She was at her house waiting on Teresa to come pick her up, and she was going to ride with her. She finally got a chance to talk to Teresa around 7.
And after that call, nothing. Dawn told the investigators she phoned Teresa over and over, and each time the phone went to a recording. Just to be sure of all this, they pulled Teresa's cell phone records and began plotting out a timeline of her whereabouts. But the picture the records painted wasn't quite what they expected. That morning call to Scott, the one he couldn't hear, Teresa did not call from Moundville.
Cell tower shows that it's pinging from up in Tuscaloosa.
Wait a minute, how could it be pinging from Tuscaloosa? That's miles and miles away.
Right. There's no way that she could have made the call and been back to the location where she was murdered at.
So, courtesy of the cell towers, you were able to show that Teresa could not have made that call. It had to be somebody else using her phone, and what do you know? Her phone is missing from the crime scene.
Correct.
So, the person who very likely killed Teresa Mayfield must have used Teresa's cell phone to call her husband, Scott. What could that mean? Did the killer know Scott? And did Scott know something he wasn't sharing?